Hello everyone and welcome. In this video I'm going to talk about references in C++. So as the name indicates, a reference is a reference to an already existing variable. Okay, it's an alias, it's a reference. And what this basically means is that by changing a reference to a variable, you will also be changing the variable itself. Okay, and this is very useful for a lot of things in C++. So let's get into it. So let me create a variable called a. It's going to be an integer and it's going to equal 2, okay? Now I'm going to create a reference to this variable, okay? Let me say int and then %b. The % indicates that this is a reference and b is the name of the reference, int is its data type, and now I'm going to set this equal to a. So what I've just done here is I've created a reference to a, which is called b. Now let me open the whiteboard to show you what this means exactly. So this is the memory of your computer, okay? Now the memory of your computer is divided into locations. It's divided into these little slots, okay? Now when you create the variable a, basically what you're doing is you're picking one of these slots and you're storing the variable a in one of these memory slots. For example, this one is going to have the value of a, which is going to be 2, okay? So this location right here, it's going to store the value 2, okay? So basically what this means is that this memory location holds the value of 2, and so when you access this certain memory location, you're going to be accessing a, which is going to be 2, okay? Now, when you create a reference to a, when you say b is equal to a, I don't know how to draw an %, I think it's something like this. So %b is equal to a, you're creating a reference to a, which is called b. Now, b isn't going to be a new variable. It isn't going to have a certain memory location, right? You're not going to store this variable b in a different memory location. What b is doing is it's referencing a. It's an alias, okay? So you're not storing it in a different memory location. Basically, what b is a little arrow that's pointing to the slot where A is stored, okay? So again, you are not storing B in a new memory location because B is not a new variable. You're not creating a new variable. You're just referencing an existing variable, meaning you're just pointing at where that variable is located in your memory, okay? So this arrow right here is going to be B, and this memory location right here, it's going to have A stored in it, okay? Now let's go back to the code and let me show you that when you change a reference, you will also change the variable that's being referenced, okay? So let me say b is equal to 5, for example, and now let me see out b, and then an empty space, and then let me see out a, okay? So let me run this to show you what it looks like. So this is going to output two 5s separated by a space. Now why does this happen? Well, that's because I've created a variable which is called a. It's going to equal 2 in the beginning, and then I've created a reference to that variable, okay? Now this reference, I've said it's equal to 5, okay? Basically what this means is the reference is pointing at the memory location of the variable that's being referenced, so it's pointing at the memory location of a. When I say b is equal to 5, since b is a reference, basically what I'm doing is erasing anything that's in that memory location that I'm pointing at. So anything that's located in the memory location of a is going to be erased and substituted by the number 5. So this memory location that has a in it is no longer going to be holding the number 2, but rather the number 5 because I've changed the reference. And so when I see out a, since the memory location of a is going to have the number 5 stored, it's going to output 5, okay? So let's go back to the whiteboard. Now, instead of this being a 2, this is going to be a 5, okay? So that's why this is outputting 5, which is the value of b, and then it's outputting 5, which is the value that's stored in the memory location of a, and so it's the value of a, okay? Now, why is this useful? Why would you want to do this in your programs? So let me delete all of this, and now I'm going to create a function up here. It's going to be a void. It's going to be called incre, which stands for increment. It's going to take in an integer n, and basically it's going to increment n, and it's going to do nothing else, just going to increment n, okay? And I have this variable a right here. Let me call the function increment with the argument of a, and now let me see out a, okay? So what is expected from this? So I have a variable called a. I've passed it in as an argument to the function incr, which basically increments the value that I pass in the function, okay? So a should be incremented to 3. Now, when I see out a, what's going to happen is it's going to output 2, okay? Even though I've incremented a to 3, supposedly, it's still going to output 2 when I see out a. Now, why does this happen? Well, that's because when I pass an a to this function, what this function does is it creates a copy of a, and it's going to increment that copy of a, but a is going to be unchanged. It's going to remain unchanged, okay? So if I call this function with the argument a, and then I see out a, then a is going to have the same value. It's not going to be incremented because what was incremented in the function was the copy of a, okay? Now, if I want to change this, I'm going to put an ampersand here. And this is going to be a reference to a instead of a copy of a. Okay, so now if I call the function with the argument a, then I'm passing in a reference to a, and I'm incrementing that reference. And since when I change a reference, I'm also changing the variable that's being referenced, then this is going to increment the value of a. So if I run this, this is going to output 3, okay? So once again, basically what I'm doing here is instead of passing in a and then creating a copy of a and incrementing that copy but leaving a unchanged, I'm passing in a reference to a and I'm incrementing that reference inside of the function. And so when I see out a after calling the function, then a is going to be incremented by 1, okay? So I hope this was easy to understand. Now let's get into some nuances of how to use references. Let me just delete all of this, which I won't need, and let me create a reference to A, which is going to be called B, okay? Now the first thing is couting B and %B is actually different. So if I say cout B, and I run this, this is actually going to give me the value of B, so whatever value is stored in the memory location that B is pointing at. But if I cout %B, then I'm couting the reference, okay? I'm couting the memory location that B is pointing at. So if I run this, then this is going to give me a random set of numbers and letters, which is going to be the memory location that B is pointing at, okay? Now the second thing is you can't leave a variable, you can't leave a reference uninitialized, okay? You can't say something like %b and just leave it like this, okay? You can't do this with a variable because you're just defining it, you're just declaring it, you're creating it, you're allocating memory to store it, but you're not really giving it a value, you're not really putting a certain value in that memory location. But you've told the program that that variable exists and that that memory should be reserved for that variable. But you can't do that with a reference because a reference is always referencing something that exists, and you have to specify what the reference is referencing. So you can't leave it uninitialized, okay? Now, the third thing, I think, is the reference has to be the same data type as the variable, okay? So if the variable is an int, then the reference has to be an int. If I put something like a boolean in here, then this is going to give me an error. If I just run this, although I'm not doing anything, this is going to give me an error. Cannot bind non-const value reference of type bool to a value of type int. So you cannot do this, okay? You can't define a variable as an integer and then define a reference to that variable but make it a boolean. You can't really do that. And the last thing is that you can create references of references. So I can say int %b equals a, I'm referencing a, and then I can say int %c equals b, and then int %d equals c, and so on. Now, if I change the, then, if I change the like this, then this is going to change all of the references in the variable that are being referenced, like kind of behind it, like it's like a domino effect, okay? So if I run this, well, actually, let me just cout a, and then let me cout b, and then c, and then d, like this. if I run this, this is going to output 4 fours, okay? It's kind of like a domino effect where you like change the last reference that you made, and all of the references that were being referenced before it are also going to be changed. Okay, so I think that's all I had to show you today. I hope this video was helpful. If it was, please leave a like. I know that references are kind of a difficult concept for beginners, so if you had trouble understanding it, don't feel bad, and you can also always ask me as many questions as you want. Okay, so thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.